We'll be back from the break. You're still watching Smart Men's Business. Amanchu Barije. Well, it's exactly 3 minutes past 9. Of course, still your daily Kickstarter. Well, of course, coming up next, we are heading into our business insights on the Zabo platform, which as I speak right now have already opened. Now, for you to be a part of this, simply dial *292# and you'll be availed with quite lots of options where you can choose to buy government bonds and securities for just as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. Now, the markets open at 8:15 a.m., closing at 3:15 p.m. East African time, effective Monday up to Friday. Well, and of course, life has been made really much more easy for you when you own the government bonds and securities. Now, this is something that you should be a part of. There is no excuse why you shouldn't own them, because life has just been made easy. This is a side income for you, something quite very beneficial when it comes to your well-being. Now, Zabo simply says, my money, my future, and all Texas East Africa says, do something new. 2023, definitely we have to do things the right way. Well, of course, not to forget, it's the Nutrition Week, and we know nutrition as one of the functions quite very critical. Of course, when it comes to the nation's well-being, sometimes they don't really pay attention to it, but it has long-term implications. Show me a country with a poor nutrition, I'll be able to tell you the economic state of that country. So that is why it's very important to celebrate the Nutrition Week and why it's very, very important. And now my guest this morning, of course, is a respectable lady, of course, dealing with nutrition-related matters. And of course, that is Rosette Chomhangi Kahiga, of course, working with SIGA as a technical support officer, budget monitoring and expenditure. Of course, we need to understand how this gets into. Rosette, you're very welcome on Smart Men's Business. A very good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. Now, in just 30 seconds, talk about yourself. 30 seconds.
Well, my name is Rosette Chomhangi Kahiga, like you correctly introduced me, yeah. And I work for an international organization called SIGA, Center for Economic Governance and Accountability in Africa, based in South Africa. But we are part of a consortium here, which actually defends the right for children to have better nutrition outcomes, known as Right to Grow, which is funded by the Dutch government. Okay.
Now, somebody would love to ask themselves, why is it important actually to celebrate the Nutrition Week?
It's very, very important to actually celebrate the Nutrition Week because every person, their fundamental growth is based on nutrition. Our development, our economic status is all related to nutrition. So when you're not fed well, even when you're a child, you're affected in terms of how you concentrate, how you conceptualize things, but also it affects normal growth. You find a child who is supposed to be probably 4 years looking like they are 2 years, so they are stunted. So we need to celebrate it so that we raise the awareness of Ugandans about the importance of feeding mothers when they are lactating or even when they are pregnant, and even children who are born, so that we have a productive Uganda in future. Okay.
You know, when I love the post that you hold there regarding technical officer, budget monitoring and expenditure tracking. And now, of course, looking at this, trying to relate it to the financial aspects, economic terms, I want us to look at a situation where poor nutrition in a country can actually affect its economy. And we also take a look at how improved nutrition can foster economic growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just like you said, the reason actually we are doing budget monitoring is to hold our government accountable. Remember, the monies that are used to provide health services or even services across the nation are as a result of taxation, general taxation from the public.
Okay.
So our role as BMAT champions are to ensure that actually the government allocates sufficient or maybe near to sufficient resources towards nutrition so that we see the productivity of the country. Because like I mentioned earlier, if people are not fed well, even school-going children, if they are not fed well, they will not concentrate in school. We've had issues of where kids have dropped out of school simply
Very
because
true.
they are not provided with meals in school. But the most important and the lethal effects are even when it comes to stunting, when a child's brain has not developed because they have not been fed well, their mothers are not eating nutritious foods, they don't have supplements, or maybe they are not given enough education to understand how they should feed. And so that affects how children are growing. And recently we actually found out from statistics that in this generation as we speak, about 50% of Ugandans are stunted, which means out of the population that you sample, 50% are not able to actually comprehend what we need to do, even be productive in a way or another. So that's why it's important that actually government allocates sufficient budget towards nutrition and food security.
Food security.
Yes.
And maybe before we get into the budget allocation terms, I would love to create a picture. I mean, some people don't understand the aspect of feeding well. What is feeding well in this aspect regarding this? Because there are people that feed. You can be affected with a malnutrition disease because you don't get enough. But also, can't we apply to sometimes the feeding we get can actually also lead to some implications in our body?
Yes.
It can. You eat too much, and before you know it, I think does nutrition also cover that aspect of how to eat right?
Yes, definitely. Actually, that's what nutrition is all about. In Right to Grow, we subscribe to 3 domains, which is food security, meaning a family should have enough to eat, or they should have the frequency of eating should be adequate, which we always say the minimum should be 3 times a day. Then food nutrition is actually about not only eating enough, but making sure that you eat a balanced diet.
A balanced diet.
A balanced diet.
Okay.
So if you only eat enough, but you're eating things like portion beans all the time, it will still have an effect on you. So you have to balance it. You have to have greens, you have to have vegetables, you have to, and even to avoid junk food. You brought in an aspect of obesity. Obesity is also one of the things that is leading to non-communicable diseases, like diabetes, high blood pressure, even cancers, because our eating these days, we are not very particular on the composition or what ingredients our foods are. These days, we have lots of foods that are marketed a lot in supermarkets, sweeteners, preservatives, which are really toxic. So it's a whole lot of things, not just about eating 3 meals. You're supposed to eat well and also avoid some of those junks that might have an effect on your health.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we would love to know to what extent are Ugandans picking up the message of nutrition and applying it to their livelihoods?
Actually, before the Right to Grow began, when we did the baseline study, we actually found out that people were really not very aware about feeding habits, best practices in feeding. So Right to Grow as a program is actually trying to do that mass education and also to ensure that people are taught. We do advocacy, we do mass communication, we do a whole lot of things.
Yes.
We build capacities of citizens to be able to hold their governments accountable, to have the knowledge of knowing that they have the right to actually find out maybe what government is doing as far as nutrition is concerned. Yeah. And also WASH. WASH is another thing that is always neglected, but even when you eat so well, but your hygiene practices are poor, or maybe you don't have access to safe, clean water, it will still cause diseases, diarrhea, which will then result into anemia. So it's a combination of all those 3 things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a Nutrition Week, and we are discussing matters to do with nutrition. And of course, we get to realize that quite lots of people in the country and world at large die out of diseases that are related to nutrition. It could be obesity, or of course not feeding the right way, and some starve, as a result of that, and that leads to quite lots of deaths, most especially to potential personnel that could build this economy for further prosperities. And that's why if a country has an established nutrition system and the citizens are healthy, they are fed well, definitely economic growth will be experienced in the long run. Maybe now still discussing nutrition. We would also love to know what are some of the challenges, because I know government is doing whatever it takes to that. Now coming on the other side of you, the private players into this, what are some of those challenges you've encountered when it comes to implementing nutrition policies out there to the people to know?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, one of the challenges we are having as we speak now, we have our food and nutrition bill that has been on the shelf for a very long time.
Okay.
Actually, the most updated one, I think, was in 2003, and then they tried to revamp it up to around 2009, but from there it kind of then got stuck. So we've really been advocating for that to come out of the shelves. And actually, one of the things that the parliamentarians are going to do this week, it's called Uganda Parliamentarian Alliance on Food and Nutrition Security. Yeah. They are going to hold a consultative workshop about the same bill to ensure that wherever it is, maybe they will even move a private member's bill.
Private member's bill, okay.
Yes, because it's really been there for a long time. So as we speak, we really don't have a proper policy that is guiding, in place. But we have an action plan called the Uganda Uganda Nutrition Action Plan 2, which we are using to implement. So some of the challenges are things like, of course, policies that are not updated, but we are also grappling with the issue of implementing a multi-sectoral approach, because
what is that like?
Multi-sectoral, because nutrition is a cross-cutting thing. It does not lie under one ministry. For example, Ministry of Health, because even agriculture has a stake, even social development has a stake.
Okay.
You know, it cuts across
a number of ministries.
Exactly.
Okay.
So teasing out what is basically nutrition, even for some of us who do budget analysis, has really been hard, because most of it is embedded in other activities, and then you're not able to tease out what nutrition is. And also, it does not have a vote of its own.
Okay.
So it's kind of a challenge to kind of really get that proper, minute allocation that is given to nutrition. But of course, we've done some analysis, and where we have been able to tease out, you can still say that the allocations are very small, meaning it has not really been prioritized.
Now, that's exactly where I was coming. If we were to look at last week, the appropriation bill was signed. Of course, we're waiting for the president to consent to it, for it to become a budget. But then I want us to take a look at what has been allocated there. Is it favorable for this year? But also, I wanted us to have a comparison from the previous budget, vis-a-vis the previous location and the current location.
Yeah.
What are the standings like, and what were the outcomes of the previous budget in terms of nutrition, and what are the expected outcomes looking at this budget this year?
Thank you so much. I must say that because this budget has not really yet been signed into law, like you said, by the president, we haven't really done a whole lot of an analysis. However, there is a very positive thing that has come out from our previous advocacy messages, because Ministry of Finance has issued a budget circular call to Chapter 8, I think, where they are actually mandating most ministries to plan and budget for nutrition. So
most ministries? Most of the ministries. Okay.
So we actually we need to now look through and see, compared to last year, whether there has been that budget in the different ministries that have been mandated by Ministry of Finance or not. And if not, then it's also our responsibility to hold those ministries accountable. Yes, so that's one of the positive things that we can say. But when you look at the previous budgets, like I already mentioned, I think about an average of 0.07% has been allocated throughout about the past 4 years, which is really, really, really minute.
I think it's small.
It's very small, showing that it has really not been prioritized. And I think that's why most people actually don't know about the importance of nutrition They just feel as long as you eat, that's okay. And even some people are not even able to access the meals. We had an example of the Karamoja people wasting away because of food insecurities.
That's true.
Yeah, so it's something that we are calling government to call, like, please give this attention, because feeding well can actually prevent a whole lot of diseases. So it's a very good preventative measure that will stop government spending even more on curative, on healthcare. Yes.
Okay. Well, quite something very interesting to check out here for. Of course, government spending towards healthcare related aspects. Yet, these are some of the diseases that can actually be treated by nutrition. Maybe the viewers would want to know. Can we estimate the amount of money we can save if we adapt to nutrition full swing? Because I feel like what we've just said about government spending and nutrition, how many diseases do you think people suffer from? And when you dissect them, you realize that it's a nutrition issue. Vis-a-vis probably these other infections that might come out there.
Yes.
If we are to wait on a percentage on a percentage level.
Actually, it's a whole lot. You could say about 30% or 40% of the disease that people suffer as a result of poor nutrition practices. Things like cancer, that is related to eating junk food, junk food and things like that, preservatives, some of the things we drink from the supermarket, those juices and all that. They have those preservatives, but also lots of sugars can lead to that. Lots of sugars can lead to non-communicable diseases such as diabetes as well. Many people who suffer from diabetes is because the composition of their foods and the ingredients in the foods they eat is really not healthy. High blood pressure, lots of fats. But when it comes to children suffer wasting. They die. Wasting means you die because you have lacked to eat enough.
Oh, they have not eaten enough.
Yeah, yes. Like the case of Karamoja, they become too thin and all that. Then they also die from anemia because maybe their mothers, when they were feeding, they did not have enough iron or folic acid. So it's a whole lot of things. And then diseases like diarrhea are also caused by, poor food, also sanitation.
Sanitation,
and, lack of, lack of access to clean water, clean and safe water. So there are lots of diseases that can actually be controlled through practicing good nutrition. Yeah. And that's why government needs to now start thinking about prioritizing, how they plan, how they budget, and how to even enforce the laws once they are passed, so that people are really, so that most of these diseases are prevented.
Maybe finally, before we just left with a few minutes, like 3, let's talk about GMOs. Don't you think the GMOs have affected nutrition in a way?
Yes, of course they have. They have. And that's a very good point that you just mentioned, because most of our foods now are modified. They are not organic. They are not organic anymore.
That one is absolutely true.
Exactly, simply because the business people want to make profit within the shortest time possible. So we need to also watch out. There is a food and safety bill that was, I think, ascended to, or maybe it's in the process. So those are the things. But one thing I need to caution you about also is we have so many policies or laws which are not enforced. So it's one thing having the laws in place, it's another enforcing the laws. Yeah.
Well, something key there, enforcing laws, putting up policies but not being enforced.
Exactly.
Yes, quite a weakness there, and most especially when we come to such a sensitive aspect here like nutrition, something which needs to really be paid ultimate attention to the responsible stakeholders. Maybe your last words as we say goodbye.
Okay, my last words are, first of all, as we celebrate the Nutrition Week, I would like all Ugandans from different aspects, be it the development partners, be it, of course, development partners are really not Ugandans as such, but they are working and supporting Uganda.
Yes.
The private sector, the government, members of parliament, academia, we should all rally towards this noble cause of ensuring that we actually prioritize our nutrition. We make it like we bring it out there because, like you've said, people are ignorant.
Necessity.
As a necessity, people shouldn't just look at it like a by the way, but it should always be at the backbone of every Ugandan that if we eat well, we shall develop to our full potential, but we shall also contribute to the development of the nation. Yeah.
That is very, very key. Well, just 2 minutes to the top here as we're getting done here. My guest this morning was Rosette Muhangi Kahiga, of course working with SIGA as a technical support officer and budget monitoring and expenditure tracking. Well, now let's get into a short break. Definitely when we return, further related discussions will be coming up. Good morning.